Measuring. It might sound obvious, but measuring, the first step to creating perfect cakes, takes care. Baking is a science, and inexact measurements will yield inferior results. We provide weights for dry ingredients in our recipes and use a digital scale to weigh them. We strongly recommend you do too. But if you're dead set on measuring these ingredients by volume, there's a way to increase your accuracy: the dip and sweep method. Dip the measuring cup into the flour, sugar, or other dry ingredient and sweep away the excess with a straight-edged object, such as the back of a butter knife. For wet ingredients, we use a liquid measuring cup. For an accurate reading, set the cup on a level surface and bend down to read the bottom of the concave arc at the liquid surface, known as the meniscus line at eye level. And for sticky ingredients, we recommend using an adjustable measuring cup. If you don't own one, spray a dry measuring cup with vegetable oil spray before filling it. When emptied, the liquid should slide right out of the cup. Mixing. Once your ingredients are measured, mixing can begin. Depending on the recipe and the desired outcome, doughs can be mixed by hand, by using a mixer, or in a food processor. The most common and basic mixing method, which we use for the walnut drops, is called creaming, and it's done in a stand mixer. You beat softened butter and the sugar together until the mixture is pale and fluffy. Next, you mix in the eggs, adding them one at a time to ensure they're combined, followed by the dry ingredients. These are added gradually to avoid overmixing, which yields tough cookies. This approach accomplishes two things. First, it makes the butter malleable, which allows other ingredients to blend in easily. Second, the tiny sugar crystals act like extra beaters, helping to incorporate air into the butter as it's creamed. These tiny air pockets expand during baking, giving the cookie lift and forming its crumb. Occasionally scraping down the bowl with a spatula guarantees that everything is incorporated. Any way you mix it, while creaming may be the most common mixing method, it's not the only one, and some of the doughs in this book use other methods. Each serves a specific purpose, so it's important to use the right technique to ensure that your cookies have the desired texture and shape. These are the two other main mixing methods. Reverse creaming. We use reverse creaming when we want tender but sturdy cookies, with minimal rise and flat tops. It's perfect for recipes like our foolproof holiday cookies, which we glaze and decorate, or our striking vanilla bean apricot sandwich cookies, which we fill with jam. You start by combining all of the dry ingredients and then you incorporate softened butter. Finally, you add any liquid ingredients. During this process, the butter coats the flour particles, therefore minimizing gluten development for a tender, fine crumb. Just as important, since the butter isn't beaten with sugar, less air is incorporated, which translates to less rise and a sturdier cookie. By hand, when a cookie recipe calls for melted butter, it makes sense to simply stir together the soft dough by hand. But there's another reason to do this. Typically when melted butter is called for in a cookie recipe, as it is in our perfect chocolate chip cookies and our brown sugar cookies, the goal is to create a very chewy cookie. Once the butter is melted, the water in it can more freely interact with the flour to develop gluten, the protein that gives baked goods chew. Vigorously mixing the ingredients together in a bowl facilitates this process and doesn't incorporate air the way a stand mixer does. The result is chewy, not cakey cookies. Can you use a handheld mixer? We use a stand mixer in many of our cookie recipes. To see if an electric handheld mixer was up to the task and could produce the same results, we conducted side-by-side tests by making oatmeal cookies with the two. Although the stand mixer produced a dough with more volume, the baked cookies were identical in number, texture, and flavor. Neither mixer had trouble mixing oatmeal and nuts into the stiff dough on low speed. That being said, the stand mixer offers greater flexibility and versatility, so we call for it in our recipes. In addition, its freestanding base leaves the cook free to accomplish other tasks. However, with some adjustments for time and technique, a handheld mixer generally yields comparable cookies. Forming. Once you've created a cohesive dough, the next step is shaping the cookies. For drop cookies like this one, you'll portion off a measurement of dough according to the recipe, anywhere from a tablespoon for these walnut drops to a quarter cup for our big, chewy chocolate chunk oatmeal cookies with pecans and dried cherries, and roll it between your hands to form a ball. Doing this, rather than just dropping mounds of dough on the baking sheet, ensures cookies of equal size that bake evenly. As you form the dough balls, you space them evenly on parchment paper lined baking sheets. Even spacing is particularly important so the cookies don't spread into one another in the oven and so they bake evenly. The fridge is your friend. Some recipes, often slice and bake recipes like chocolate toffee butter cookies, 60 small cookie planks, and rolled and cut out cookies like cornmeal orange cookies, 84 thin rounds, yield a large number of cookies. In this case, we like to keep a portion of the dough chilled while we form cookies from another portion. If all of the dough is left out for the entire process, it could become too soft and sticky, making it hard to work with and turning out misshapen cookies. Think flat-edged vanilla icebox cookies or armless gingerbread people. Baking. Once shaped, the cookies are ready for baking, during which starch is gelatinized to set the cookie's crumb and sugars caramelized to brown the cookie. But you can't just set them and forget them. Make sure your oven is at the proper temperature by using an oven thermometer and switch, if using more than one baking sheet, and rotate the position of the baking sheets so that the cookies brown and bake evenly. If you're baking in batches, be sure to let the baking sheets cool and reline them with fresh parchment before reusing. What pan to use? We bake all cookies on a sturdy rimmed baking sheet. Rimless cookie sheets will work, however. Cookies baked on a rimless pan brown more quickly and can finish baking several minutes before those on a rimmed pan. Why? Heat rises from the element at the bottom of the oven and circulates in currents to warm the entire chamber. A rimmed baking sheet's raised edges divert hot air currents from the cookies to the top of the oven. A rimless sheet allows hot air to immediately sweep over the cookies. Flimsy sheets of either type will result in overbaked cookies. What rack to bake on? We develop cookie recipes with the oven rack set to specific positions, so when you use our recipes, you want to make sure to adjust the racks as directed. When we're baking just one sheet of cookies at a time, we nearly always bake them on the middle rack. When we're baking 2 sheets at a time, we use the upper middle and lower middle positions. The middle of the oven is always a safe bet. The closer to the bottom of the oven, the browner the bottoms of your cookies will be relative to the tops. Avoiding uneven baking. Baking 2 trays of cookies at a time may be convenient, but the cookies on the top tray are often browner around the edges than the ones on the bottom tray. If you have 2 sheets in the oven, you should switch their positions halfway through baking. For cookies with an especially finicky texture, we call for baking the cookies 1 sheet at a time so heat circulates around the baking sheet evenly for the entire baking time. Even the best ovens have hot and cold spots, so rotating the baking sheet, the cookies that were in the front will now be in the back of the oven, is essential. Cooling. Different cookies require different cooling methods to ensure they set up properly. Many basic drop cookies, such as these walnut drops, require a short rest on the baking sheet, typically about 5 minutes, so they are firm enough to move. After that, they are transferred to a wire rack, where air can circulate around them, to finish cooling. If you're filling a cookie with jam or chocolate or topping it with frosting or glaze, it needs to be completely cool before you apply these ingredients.